you would open your Bibles, please, to Proverbs 31. I believe verse 10 through 31 is in the bulletin, but we're going to back up to verse number 1 for sake of context. Very often when we talk about the virtuous woman in Proverbs 31, we get right down to verses 10 through 31 where the virtues of this virtuous woman are mentioned, but we forget about the greater context of the first 9 verses, which gives us a better perspective of how we should view this virtuous woman in verses 10 through 31. So we see here in verse 31, or chapter 31, verse 1, the words of King Lemuel, the utterance which his mother taught him. So first of all, we see here that the original intended audience of what is going to be said here in Proverbs 31 was not women, right? The original intended audience was a mother, a wife and mother that is speaking to her son, and she is going to give him advice or recommendation on what type of woman to look for in verses 10 through 31. It's important to see that what we're studying today is not from a chauvinistic male. This is from a woman that is giving godly advice to her son about what to look for in a woman. Now, that's probably different than most times when we read this. We're thinking that she's speaking to women, but actually she's speaking to her son. And the son in this context, it talks about King Lemuel. And the Jewish tradition or Jewish history tells us that this was believed to be Solomon, that this was King Solomon, which makes sense, right? Most of the Proverbs came from King Solomon, so that would make sense if that were the case. So if this is Solomon, then we know that the woman speaking to him is Bathsheba. And if you think about that, there's a message right in that alone that this is Bathsheba speaking to King Solomon and giving him advice about what type of ruler to be and what type of wife to look for. It's profound because you remember Bathsheba. You can't think of a woman and a man, her and David, that got off to a rockier start in their marriage than they did, right? You got to remember that David and Bathsheba started off as adulterers, committing adultery against their spouses, both of them being married at the time. You'll remember that she became impregnated, and David sought to conceal this matter by bringing her husband, Uriah, back from war and bringing him back to the household to try to cause him to be with his wife so that it would look like it was his child and not David's child. And he sought to conceal it. And then after that failed, because he was an honorable man and he would not go in with his wife while the other troops were in the discomfort of being out in tents, out in battle. He was an honorable man. And so David then plots his death and writes directions of how to have him killed in battle, to go into the hottest battle and then to withdraw so that he would be killed. So he plotted his murder. They get married. She has a baby. The baby dies. I mean, this is a tragic beginning to a marriage, right? You can't think of a horrible or worse way to start a marriage than this way. And yet, she went from this place of brokenness to a place of wholeness, to a place of wellness. And she becomes this virtuous woman of Proverbs 31. She becomes this wise woman giving godly counsel to her son. And we shouldn't be surprised by this, right? God excels in taking broken people and making them whole again. God excels in taking the weak things of this world, the foolish things of this world, and confounding the wise with them. Right? When God wants to form a nation, he goes to a man who is childless, who's without heir. He goes to Abraham. And he goes to Abraham, who has no child, has no heir. He's an older man. And he goes to him and says, you're going to be the father of a multitude. I mean, that's just the way God does things. When he wants to deliver his people out of Egypt, he goes and finds an old man who's 80 years old on the backside of the desert with a speech impediment. Right? And someone who's, seen his best years already gone by him. And he goes and he finds him and sends him back to Egypt, and by the power of the Lord brings the most powerful nation in the world to its knees. That's what God does. He takes the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. And here, he takes a Bathsheba, who started off on the rocky road with her husband David, and things didn't go well. And yet here, we find that she is this virtuous woman with wise counsel for her son. Another thing you can learn just by these opening remarks is that it's unfortunate but true that we as parents, the godly counsel or advice that we give our kids is not always adhered to. King Solomon did not follow his mother's advice. He ended up with 700 wives and 300 mistresses. He had 1,000 women, which ended up destroying the kingdom of Israel. Ended up dividing the kingdom north and south, and he was responsible for it because it says that the women that he married and the women that were his concubines, they led his heart away from the Lord. And he was led astray, and this created such great turmoil within Israel. And so he never adhered to the advice and the wisdom of his mother. And sometimes we have to realize, because you may have kids that go astray, you may have kids that don't listen to your advice. You won't be the first and you won't be the last to have had kids that didn't listen to you. Because there's this precedence here that we see a woman, a virtuous woman, giving wise counsel to her son, and he never obeyed it. In fact, you could go to Ecclesiastes and you could read how miserable Solomon was over the fact that he never found this virtuous woman. Never found it. And he was miserable because of it. It affected his life forever. So we see here that, again, the original audience was men, or a son in this case, not women. Right? So this should not be viewed, verses 10 through 31, should not be viewed as a checklist for you ladies of you got to do all of these things, and if you don't measure up to all of these things, then you're not a good woman. That's not the way this should be approached. This is, again, godly advice to her son, giving him a general outline of what type of qualities to look for in a woman. So for the male, this is advice to you, if you're a single male, as to what to look for in a woman. And if you're a woman, these are things to aspire to be a godly woman. But again, do not view it as a checklist, because it was never presented to be a checklist of, here's these, how many verses is that? 22 verses. Here's 22 things that you've got to subscribe to. And if you don't, you're a failure. Okay, don't approach it that way. If you do, you're not going to like this virtuous woman, right? Have you ever been around people, think about it, if you were around Jesus, who's perfect in everything he does, that's intimidating, it's imposing, and it can lead to great condemnation and great inadequacies, because you're around perfection all the time. So if you look at this Proverbs 31 woman, she is fantastic. She's dynamite. All right, and you might look at her, and then you look at yourself, and you might think, how in the world am I going to measure up to this? Okay, and that's, again, not the concept that is being portrayed here. In fact, if you keep it in context, you have to remember who Bathsheba is and who King Solomon is. These are wealthy people. This is a people of means, right? People of position and rank. You'll find out as we get into this in just a moment here that this woman has servants. Well, it'd be easy to do all the things that she does if you have servants, right? I mean, because she has servants that she can appoint to do things for her. So there's certain things that might be inapplicable to you and I just because of the position that they're in. But you can still be a virtuous woman without having to have servants and be, a person of means and substance. An example of that would be Ruth, right? Ruth was in chapter 3, I believe it is. We know that Boaz referred to Ruth as a virtuous woman, as a woman of noble character. But now, Ruth had different circumstances in her life than this virtuous woman of Proverbs 31. The virtuous woman in Proverbs 31 is wealthy, she has servants, she has a business she's running, she's doing all of these things, and Ruth doesn't have anything. She's not married. She doesn't have children. Her husband is deceased. She's poor. She's gleaning in the fields of Boaz. She's so poor. You remember Israel had laws that one way to help the poor is the farmers would leave food or leave leftover crops in the fields, and the poor could come and glean. They could come and work and take and harvest the leftovers in the fields so that they could eat and be taken care of. And I think there's a principle there, right? They still had to work. They still had to go out and glean. They still had to do something. If they didn't get a check in the mail, they still had to go out and glean. They had to go out and harvest what was in the fields left over. That was her condition. She was not in a high and lofty position. She was not well-to-do. She wasn't rich. She didn't have servants. So it's not the circumstances that we're looking at here in this virtuous woman. We're looking at the character of this woman. Right? Ruth had a whole different set of circumstances, but she was still declared to be a virtuous woman. Right? So don't get caught up in the intricacies of the circumstances of this woman, but be caught up in the character and the virtues that you see in this woman. I think if you do that, you'll be more blessed than if you don't do that. If you just look at it as an itemization of things you've got to do, you're going to always be trying to measure up to this standard. Okay? And that's not the intention of this. Now, I like the fact, we're going to read this now, but I like the fact, again, that this is a woman that is giving the advice. I'm glad. Because always when you're a man and you're preaching to women about being wives and mothers, it's a daunting task for 3 reasons. Number 1, I'm not a woman. Number 2, I'm not a wife. And number 3, I'm not a mother. So I have really no practical experience from which to speak to you about, right? I can't identify with you on those levels. So I'm thankful that this is a woman speaking and giving the advice, because I can say as a man that I can't relate to you on those levels, but she can, and she's giving you godly advice, and I'm just simply repeating what this woman said, okay? So we're good to go there. Proverbs 31 again, verse 1. The words of King Lemuel, the utterance from his mother, taught him, "What my son, and what son of my womb, and what son of my vows." Now she says son 3 different times, from the present time to the time that he was in gestation within her, and to the time that she made vows to the Lord. And I believe this is just her emphatic way of saying, hey, you're my kid, all right? You better listen to me. I bore you. I carried you for 9 months. I've delivered you. I've had vows before the Lord about you. You better listen to what I got to say, Lord. All right? That's what she's doing here. She's being emphatic about it. And she gives him a series of 4 advice. Is that the right word? Advice? 4 advices doesn't sound right. What's that? Yeah, 4 things of what she thinks that he should do. All right, and then the 5th is going to be about the virtuous woman. So, number 1, do not give your strength to women, nor your way to that which destroys kings. And so the first advice is, hey, don't be sexually immoral. Don't go out there and give all your strength to women. You give your strength to women, you won't have any strength left over to govern the nation, to be a leader. And you'll find here that he's going to talk about sexual promiscuity. He's going to talk about overindulgence to alcohol. He's going to talk about ruling justly or fairly. And talk about, lastly, about speaking up for the poor and oppressed and the needy. And I think this is important. It's so practical, because if you think about the elite wealthy and the elite people of authority in the world, they're more susceptible to these temptations of sexual immorality, of overindulgence, and of forgetting about the needs of others, because everything is accessible to them. They're in a position of prominence. They're in a position of authority. They have means. They have wealth. They have servants. They have all these things. And it's more easy for them to give, or it's easier for them to give into these temptations, these inclinations, because it's accessible to them. And so I think it's wise counsel not only for them, but for today. It is not for kings, O Lemuel, it is not for kings to drink wine, nor for the princes intoxicating drink, lest they drink and forget the law, and pervert the justice of all the afflicted. Give strong drink to him who is perishing, and wine to those who are bitter of heart. Let him drink and forget his poverty, and remember his misery no more. She's simply telling him that if you become an overindulger of alcohol, that it's going to pervert your senses, your sense of right and wrong. It's going to dull you. You're not going to have the discernment and the wisdom and the discretion that you need. Right? You think about alcohol as being a depressant, and you have too much alcohol, you can't drive right. It just affects everything, your perception of everything. And so she's saying to him, if you want to be a leader and you want to lead well, you can't give yourself to strong drink, because you can't allow anything to distort your understanding and perception of what is right and wrong. And that's good advice. That's good counsel. She says it's for, today, if somebody was dying, we would give them morphine so they would die without pain, right? Well, back then, of course, you didn't have morphine, so you give them, wine. You give them strong drink so that they would die without pain. Today we give medications for people that have severe anxiety and depression, and we treat those things. Well, again, the way they did it back then was they didn't have those things, so they would give them a strong drink and wine, and that's all she's saying. It's not for you to do it because you have to be in a position of leadership. You have to have your mind clear. Your judgment has to be sound. Open your mouth for the speechless. In the cause of all who are appointed to die, open your mouth, judge righteously, and plead the cause of the poor and needy. So in her telling him not to only rule justly and righteously, but also speak up for those that are oppressed. Speak up for those that are poor and needy. For example, this would be good for you kids in the church right now, because you'll probably be more apt to see it than we will as adults, although it does exist among adults. You as kids, if you see kids at school being bullied, being oppressed, being pushed around and made fun of and laughed at, don't be the one that's laughing with everybody else or making fun of them with everybody else. Stand up for them, speak up for them, plead their cause, plead their case, stand up, right? A bully's a bully because nobody stands up to him. Stand up to them, and once you do, it'll relieve the pressure off the student that's being put down. I remember years ago, this was back in my high school years, I graduated with a boy named Jeremy. I can't remember his last name. We went to school together for a few years. I think we graduated 8th grade together, and then we went to different high schools. And he had always been picked on. Horribly treated. Even I thought so, and I wasn't a Christian by any means at the time, but I just thought he was horribly picked on. And time went on. I think it was in his high school. I don't know if it was his junior or senior year. He put a bullet in his head because he'd been so picked upon and teased and maligned for so many years that he ended up killing himself. And I'm saying to you, don't allow people to bully other people, right? Don't stand idly by and just, laugh along with them or joke along with them. No, stand up for the oppressed, the poor, the needy, the downcast, right? And that's what he's saying here. Now, you got to apply it to our setting. We're obviously not kings, but we can obviously speak up for those that are being bullied around. Stand up for them. And then finally, she gets down to verse 10, and this is where it gets fun, because in verse 10 through verse 31, many of you probably know this. This is what is called in Jewish literature as an acrostic poem. And an acrostic poem is this. It would be sort of like us today saying that this is the virtuous woman from A to Z. So each verse here begins with a different letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and successively on down, like we would A, B, C, successively down, each verse is starting out with one of these Hebrew letters. So it'd be kind of like saying A is for attitude, B is for beloved, C is for charity, D is for dependable. And it's meant to help the young man that she's counseling to remember. This is the virtues of a virtuous woman. This is what a type of woman is that you're looking for. And I have to agree that it's quite obvious that this counsel is coming from a woman, because the things that are mentioned here are things that as a young man you would not think of. There's things in this passage I as a man would certainly not think of. It probably would not be on my top 5 list, okay? But for this woman, these are the top things that she wants her son to look for in a woman. All right, so I think you can see that in this, it's a message to everybody. It's a message to men, to women, single women, married women. It's a message to everybody. So she says, who can find a virtuous wife? For her worth is far above rubies. The heart of her husband safely trusts her. She will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not evil all the days of her life. So these first 3 verses, 10, 11, and 12, all revolve around her relationship with her husband. Number 1, she's a virtuous woman, a woman of valor, a woman of strength, a woman of honor and integrity. And the Bible says that a virtuous wife who can find. In other words, this is an uncommon woman. This is not your average woman that you're just going to meet any given day. In fact, the Bible is implying here that she's difficult to find. That this is not, you can't just pick her anywhere and everywhere. This is a special, unique woman, and that's why her worth is far above rubies. She's valuable. She's precious, right? She's precious because she's unique. She's precious because she's hard to find. She's precious because she's a rare gem. She's a rare jewel. And so when you find this rare jewel, this rare gem, how do you treat that rare jewel and rare gem? Right? With honor, with esteem, with value. Right? You never get the sense when you're reading this passage that this woman is oppressed by the men in her life, that she's only valued because she's a wife and a mother. You get the sense that this woman is valuable because she is a woman. And because she's a woman of virtue, she's a woman of character, she's a woman of honor and integrity. She's not valuable because that's a very religious undertone that's brought out to people. You're only valuable as a woman if you're a wife and a mother. That's not true. You're valuable as a woman because you're in the image of God, and God has created you for a purpose in the earth, which may or may not include you being a wife or a mother. There are scriptures that remember 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Paul talks to men and women. He's saying, I wish you were all like me. Right? And Paul was single. He remained single his whole life, and he was effective for the Lord. And there are people that are called to that state of singleness. So you can't find your value just in the fact of you producing offspring, you being married and producing offspring. Your value is not connected to your husband. It's connected to the fact that you're in the image of God. There's a vast difference in how you look at it. But you never get the idea from this passage. As we look through this, you're going to find out this woman is smart. This woman makes investments. She buys land. She sells things that she makes with her hands. She invests. She plants a vineyard. This woman is active. She's known in the community. People esteem her highly. Her husband trusts her. Her kids call her blessed. She's up late. She's up early. She's always doing something. This woman is not an oppressed woman that is viewed that she can only do, make babies and clean dishes. Come on, folks. That's not this woman. This woman is not here in Proverbs 31, okay? Not at all. I mean, this would defeat some of the mindsets that people have about women, some of the religious oppression that is placed upon women in different churches, where women only find their value because they're married and have kids, and if they don't, then they're not valuable. This woman had so much more to offer than just that. Not that there's anything demeaning about being a wife and mother, obviously. Don't go to that extreme either. But she's a virtuous wife. Now it's interesting that it talks about her worth is far above rubies. But in the ancient world, very often when men would travel for business, or they would travel because they were leaders in positions of authority, they would conceal all their valuables. And so all their worth, their values, their coins, their gold, their rubies, whatever, they would conceal them. They would put them, if you will, in a safe place, and because they didn't trust the wife. And they thought that when they would leave, that the wife would take off with all the jewels. And it'd be just like today, men, if you're on a business trip or you're gone for a few days or something, leaving the checkbook and the credit card with your wife. And being able to trust her, knowing that when you come back, there's not going to be $5,000 charged on the credit card. The heart of her husband safely trusts her. He knows he can leave the credit card, everything's going to be fine. He can leave the checkbook, everything's going to be fine. He doesn't have to lock it up in the safe and hide it from her. But that's the type of woman she is. She has virtue and character that the heart of her husband safely trusts her. And something I'd like to point out here is the character that is used here in the Hebrew alphabet. They have more like characters or symbols than letters like we do. And it's the picture of a house with one open door. And in other words, what it's trying to say is this woman is in a safe enclosure for her husband. Her husband, there's only one door. There's not a back door. There's not another entry point. There's only one door. It's for her husband. And there he abides safely. He can trust safely. He can rest safely, knowing that he is secure in the arms of this woman. Right? There's that trust factor there. And so I think it's a good point to make. So he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not evil all the days of her life, right? She's making his life better, not worse. She's making his life easier, not harder. You have to remember, and this would be a whole series of messages in itself, and eventually we'll do this. You have to remember the original purpose always of man and woman. You know, modern day feminism would teach that there's no difference between man and woman. Men and women are the same. That we're identical. That we can do everything just the same. And the Bible does not teach that. The Bible teaches prior to the fall, remember, in creation, that God made woman as a helper that would be comparable. Another word for comparable would be compatible or complementarian to the husband. So she is the same in the sense that she is created equal in the sight of God, and she's of equal worth and equal value. But to say that she's identical in everything and that there's no difference between male and female is disingenuous. There are differences between men and women. We're the same in worth, the same in value, but different in function. We serve different purposes, different functions. And that's the way God designed it. That's prior to the fall. So you can't say, well, that's sin's fault. No, that's not sin's fault. That's Genesis chapter 2. The fall is in Genesis chapter 3. Right? So we are equal in value and worth. Yes, women should be able to, one good thing feminism did, it gave women the right to vote. Well, they should have had the right to vote. They're of equal worth and equal value. Of course, there should be equality in those types of things. But to make men into women and women into men is a great injustice. It's a great injustice. And so here we see that this woman is bringing value, just like in the beginning, God created the woman to be a help, not to be a hindrance, to be a blessing, not to be a curse. To better. In fact, we're going to find out later that the husband is promoted. He advances in his work. He's known in the gates. He is an elder in the land. And the reason why is because he doesn't have to worry about home, because the wife is so good at what she does that he's able to devote focus and time and attention so that other people are blessed by his life and her life. And you see that his growth and his improvement in life is based on the fact that he's got a good woman at home. Right? Behind every good man is a good woman. That is true, and that's exactly what this passage is saying. He who finds wife finds what? Good. Right? Proverbs 18:20. He who finds wife finds good and obtains favor from the Lord. A prudent wife is from the Lord. Right? A wise woman. Right? Not every wife, in that sense, is from the Lord, because it's a prudent wife, a wise woman, a virtuous woman that is from the Lord. And her worth is far above rubies. Let's continue verse 13. She seeks wool and flax and willingly works with her hands. She's like the merchant ship. She brings her food from afar. This means that she'll go out of her way to find a good deal. Right? She's like the merchant ship. She'll travel out, go a fair distance to find the best food for her family. She's a woman that looks for deals, that looks for opportunities that are good opportunities, that are good deals for her family. Right? Verse 15, she also rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household and a portion for her maidservants. I mean, she's such a woman of character and value that even though she has servants, she gets up before the servants and actually is preparing a meal for her family and for the servants. Right? Isn't that amazing? She's preparing a portion also for the servants. She doesn't have to get up. See, the point is, this woman, she could have taken great leisure. She's got servants in the house. She didn't have to get up, but she got up because it's her character. Right? I want you to get that part. I don't want you to get caught up in the little details of, well, I don't have servants in my home. I want you to see the character of the woman. She could have took it easy. She could have relaxed. She could have done nothing. But instead, she's proactive. She's always doing something. She's busy. She's always building up the home and building up the family, and things are getting better. Right? She's that type of a person. She prepares for her family and for her maidservants. She considers a field and buys it. This is a woman that is in real estate. This is a woman that has a business. She has a business mind. She's not just being trampled upon and tread upon and suppressed and oppressed. She's got smarts. She's intelligent. She considers. She's thinking about it. She ponders it. She's wondering if it's a good deal. And then she buys it because she considers it to be a good deal. She takes the profits from this and she plants a vineyard. She's investing. She's reinvesting. This is not the picture that a lot of people have of a woman, right? Within religious circles, especially in certain churches that consider themselves conservative. Right? Conservative realizes anything that is not in the Bible doesn't make it conservative, right? It's conservative because it's in the Bible. If it's not in the Bible, it's not conservative. It might be traditional, but it's not conservative. Hallelujah. Yeah, she's got it. In other words, what I'm trying to say, the woman has more to offer. More to offer than what we've given them credit for. And this is thousands of years old, folks. Thousands of years old. This is not God saying, well, women folks, they can't be investing anything. They don't have the intelligence to do so. Women can't be buying land because they're not smart enough to do so. Or women aren't supposed to be doing those things. That's not what God is saying here. That's not what's being propagated here. This woman has equal worth, equal value. She has gifts that have been given to her by God. And just like you as a male have to discern what gifts God has given you as a man so that you can use those gifts to the glory of God, the woman discerns what gifts God has given her and she uses those gifts to the glory of God. Whatever those gifts may be. We're going to close here in just a moment. We're not going to be able to get through this, but there's always next year. And Proverbs 3:1 will still be here next year. We're in verse 17. She girds herself with strength. This is a strong woman. It's referring back to her character. Right? Her value as an individual. She's strong. She's not weak. She's not trampled upon. She's not downtrodden. She's not oppressed. She's strong. She's strong and she strengthens her arms. She perceives that her merchandise is good and her lamp does not go out by night. I mean, this is amazing. This woman, she gets up early. She stays up late. I mean, I was up late a couple times this week. I was doing the articles of incorporation and bylaws for the church and redoing that. So I was up till 3, 4 in the morning a couple times. I promise you I was not up early the next morning, right? So I've decided this virtuous woman must be 21. That's what I've decided. Because when you get on the plus side of 40 and you stay up late, you don't get up early, okay? She's up late, she's up early, she's doing all. In other words, you get the idea again. Don't get caught up in the details. Get caught up in. She's not lazy. She's active. She's doing stuff. She's useful. She's productive. What did God tell them in the beginning? Be fruitful and multiply. Now, I realize that's pertaining to children, but it pertains to everything, right? Put your hand to something. Be fruitful. Be multiplying. Do good in the earth. Fill up the earth with the glory of God. Do good things. Amen? And she's doing that. Her lamp doesn't go out by night. She's always busy. We're gonna stop here. And next year we'll continue from verses 19 on down. But I hope that you see that what we're trying to say here is this woman has value because of her character, her virtues. Don't get caught up in all the semantics and all the details. Just get caught up in the fact that she's virtuous because she's a woman of character, of impeccable integrity. She's active. She's doing things for the benefit of her family. She's helping her family in the home, outside of the home, whatever needs to be done to benefit and bless her home, her household. In closing, to verify that, the husband is talked about 4 times in this passage. The kids are mentioned 1 time. Household, referring to the whole family unit, is mentioned 3 times. What I'm trying to get at is the fact that to this woman, her family matters. Her household matters. His household is the most important for her. And what she does in her business ventures, in her investing, in her profits, in her planting the vineyard and doing all of these things, she's doing it for her family. She's not this self-interest woman that doesn't care about her husband, doesn't care about her kids. She's just all about herself and about her career and about her life. No. She's not like she has things that she's doing outside of the home, but it's for her home. It's for the husband. It's for the kids. It's for the family. It's for the betterment of the next generation. Because if you just hear the other part, you might misconstrue what we're saying here today. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your word. Thank you for the wisdom. Proverbs is a book of wisdom, and thank you for the wisdom that comes to us through the scriptures. And we thank you for teaching us not only what it means to be a godly woman, godly wife, godly mother, but also godly men. Because in order to be worthy of a woman like this, we would have to be godly ourselves as men. We would have to be honorable men to attract such an honorable woman. And we ask that you, Father, would not only strengthen the women of our church to be this virtuous woman, but strengthen the strength of the men. Give the men strength to be the virtuous men and the men of character to attract and be deserving of such a gift from God. We give you praise for these things in Jesus' name. Amen.